Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for this imperative program. My name is Zainab Khan, and I am the Executive Director of the Muslim American Leadership Alliance, known as MALA. As a Muslim American nonprofit, we are a national organization that is centered on leadership and heritage and harnessing voices that amplify the pluralism, democracy, and the bedrock values of freedom the United States has to offer for our broad communities. I want to start this evening by thanking our partners, Brandon Pinsker and Peter Fox from AJC New York Access, and Judy Greenspan, Program Director of WNET Group's reporting initiative, Exploring Hate, Antisemitism, Racism, and Extremism. I am also proud to serve on their advisory board. As we begin this evening's program in observance of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, it is imperative for me to stress the need for Muslim-Jewish partnerships, such as the one we are hosting this evening. Anti-Semitism has no place, none, in the Muslim communities and institutions. The recent synagogue hostage situation must be a wake-up call to take an unconditional stand against hate and strengthen relations with our Jewish friends and neighbors. Again, I want to reiterate, we stand unconditionally with our Jewish brothers and sisters, and given the situation during the Texas hostage crisis, we demand zero tolerance for anti-Semitism amongst the Muslim communities. I will say that for too long, parts of our community have promoted or tolerated anti-Semitism, sometimes in overt denunciation of Jews and sometimes under the cover of attacking supporters of Israel. This is dangerous hate speech, and it has festered for too long and has caused too much pain. Muslims and Jews need to come together unconditionally to build a better future for our children free from hate. We at MALA want to send a clear and unambiguous message to the Jewish community. We stand with you now and always. What unites us should be not stronger than what divides us. In the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we shall overcome this crisis if we learn the lessons of the past and take bold action to build a future free from hate. Now, I want to thank everybody again for tuning in for tonight's program and to listen to Mr. Sam Steigmann's story. I am now going to pass the mic over to someone who's very near and dear to me, who I consider a mentor, a colleague, and a friend, Judy Greenspan from WNET Group. Judy, thank you so much for being here with us this evening.
Listen, thank you, Zainab, and thank you all for inviting me and asking me to participate this evening. It's really a pleasure for me to be here with the Muslim American Leadership Alliance, my friend Zainab Khan, and the American Jewish Committee. The partnership that your organizations have created with each other open up valuable opportunities for talking, listening, building bridges, seeking solutions, and bringing people together, something that I really believe we don't see enough of, and that so much can come from that. So as Zainab said, I am the program director of a new reporting initiative from the WNET Group in New York called Exploring Hate, Antisemitism, Racism, and Extremism. Launched early last year, Exploring Hate investigates the roots and the alarming rise of hate here and around the globe. We were starkly reminded yet again how sadly urgent and necessary attention to these issues are, this time last weekend during the terrifying event at Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville, Texas. You can find reporting for Exploring Hate on our website, pbs.org/exploring hate, as well as across the WNET Group's digital and broadcast platforms. Our stories appear on national and local programs like Amanpour and Company, PBS NewsHour Weekend, Metro Focus, New Jersey Spotlight News. We also partner with Frontline at GBH, as well as with independent filmmakers and writers, all looking for ways to explore this incredibly important issue. But in addition to covering today's news, Exploring Hate also, and importantly, looks back and looks closely at how history influences and illuminates current events. As former New York Times reporter Clyde Haberman wrote for us recently, quote, "The past ever shapes the present, and preserving memory is essential in a world that remains no stranger to atrocities." History matters, partnerships matter, standing up against hate and seeking solutions together matter. In honor of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I am very pleased to join MALA, the AJC, and Mr. Sammy Steigmann for this evening's program. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Dara Adams from the AJC, who will introduce Sammy Steigmann. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. My name is Dara Adams, and I'm an Access New York board member. Access New York is the American Jewish Committee's cohort of young professional leaders from across New York. As Access New York leaders, we're committed to combating all forms of hate and promoting pluralism, which is one of the many reasons why I'm honored to be here tonight, joining with MALA and WNET in commemoration of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, to welcome Holocaust survivor and award-winning motivational speaker, Sammy Steigmann. As you will hear from him in just a few moments, Sammy's life is truly remarkable. His earliest days were formed by unimaginable atrocities, but it is his faith and perseverance that are most extraordinary. A self-described optimist, Sammy believes that in every calamity, there is an opportunity. And he's made it his life's mission to share his story and wisdom with younger generations throughout the world, to teach them about the Holocaust and to empower them to promote tolerance and stand up to anti-Semitism and all forms of hate. As the British philosopher John Stuart Mill said, "Bad men need nothing more to compass their ends than that good men should look on and do nothing." Sammy chooses to fulfill his purpose by educating others, and I am truly honored to have the opportunity to introduce you all to my new friend, the inspiring and incomparable Sammy Steigmann. I now hand it over to my fellow Access New York board member, Peter Fox, who will be in conversation with Sammy. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thanks for the introduction, Dara. Hi, everyone. I'm Peter Fox. I'm a member of the AJC Access New York board, and it's my pleasure to be here speaking with Sammy Steigmann. Sammy, how are you doing? Sammy, are you there? Maybe some technical.
Okay.
Okay.
I am very honored, to be this, especially with the occasion, of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and at the same time, also that we just celebrated, remember Martin Luther King Jr., and his accomplishments. What was very impressive, at least from my perspective, is not only what he accomplished, but how he did it. And he did it without violence. And I just want to know that the Jewish people were the first group of people that marched with Martin Luther King Jr. in his Congress. In all honesty, I don't know what happened, but right now, our foundation of working together and everything else somehow has deteriorated, and I don't know the reasons. Maybe somebody can tell me, but at the same time, I'm also very honored, that to speak to MALA, with MALA, to their people. So I'm very, very honored. Thank you. And Peter, you are a true upstander, and thank you for organizing this one. I believe Brandon was also involved with you.
He was. It's our absolute pleasure for you to be speaking with us tonight. So to kick things off, I figured it would make sense to dive into your backstory. Can you tell us a little bit about how you and your family first got deported to the Nazi labor camp and your journey to where you are today?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I was born in a city which, as the borders changed, so that my nationality. As a matter of fact, when I when the whole family went to Israel. My passport, it said I was born in Romania. When I came to the United States, it said that I was born in the former Soviet Union. And today my passport, it says that I was born in Ukraine. So you understand that I'm a mixed up kid. But interestingly enough, the city where I was born, Czernowitz, was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And Franz Joseph, the emperor, he was revered by the Jews. And in my house, a lot of the Jewish people from that era, they adopted the German culture. What happened is, in 1940, when the Wehrmacht attacked the former Soviet Union, by the way, Romania was never invaded by Germany. Okay, they collaborated with the Nazis. Interestingly enough, the Romanian annexed, okay, part of Western Ukraine, Bukovina, where I was born, and Bessarabia. And that is the reason that we were deported by the Romanians, not by the Germans. In 1944, when the camp was liberated, obviously that particular area was annexed again by the Russians, by the Soviets. When my parents and I were deported, I was only a year and a half. Obviously too young to work, not having the skills or the strength. Most of the kids did not survive. And if you will ask any survivor, how come you're alive today? Everybody will use only one word, and that is luck. My luck was that I was never separated from my parents. I was subjected to medical experiments. I've been in pain all my life, will be for the rest of my life in pain every second, but you will not see it on my face. I'm coming from a generation that was and is very stoic. And the other thing is I teach the young people not to stereotype, because not every German was a criminal. My life was saved by a German woman, and she decided to give me milk when she saw the physical signs that I'm dying of starvation. And people like her that, okay, are known as the righteous among the nations. And I want to understand, for people to understand the courage that people like this particular woman took in giving me milk, is not only her life was at stake, she actually risked the life of her entire family. It's relatively easy to make a decision when it's only your life, but when it comes to the whole family, so, okay, very interesting. So please do not stereotype.
Thanks for sharing that backstory. It's super fascinating. I'd like to know that despite everything you've been through, you've acquired such a positive and optimistic mindset. Can you tell us about your personal philosophy that you're trying to instill in others?
In my particular case, it's a mindset that I had, so I did not really have to work at it. A lot of people have to work at it. But I am saying one thing. I tell the young people to compare the brain to a computer. Whatever you put in the computer, okay, that comes out. So you have to be very exact with it. And when the IBM came up with the initial computers, there was a saying, garbage in, garbage out. And I want to understand that we have to think in a positive way. Everything starts the way we think, even subconsciously. But if we think in a positive way, we will use positive words. In all my presentations, very seldom do I use negative words. If I do use a negative word and I catch myself, I will automatically correct myself. So positive thinking leads to positive words. It leads to a positive attitude. It leads to positive experiences, and it also leads to a happier life. So the way we think, and if we think in a negative way, or if we're going to tell ourselves, I cannot do this or I cannot do that, guess what? That's exactly what it will happen. Okay. And one other thing that I want to stress, a lot of people are afraid to fail. All of us have and will fail. But if you fail, in my book, you are not a failure. You will be a failure only if you don't try. And I tried out of the curiosity to find out who was rejected the most times until they became successful. And you can Google that name. I don't know it offhand right now, but a author of a children's book was rejected, listen to this, 473 times. Today, she's a multimillionaire. So my message to the young people is, under no circumstances should you ever give up, should you ever lose hope. Okay.
Thank you for imparting that wisdom. I want to talk about current anti-Semitism that we're experiencing. Just this past weekend, there was the hostage situation at the synagogue in Texas. And given all you've been through in your history, what do you make of the current moment? Do you think we can learn anything from history?
Interesting the way you put the question. Very good question. Number one, I do not want anybody to make comparisons to the past. Number one. However, we have to learn from the past. And I live in Manhattan. For practical purposes, I was in house arrest because of COVID for 1.5 years. However, there is another virus that is much more dangerous, and that is the virus of bullying, bigotry, anti-Semitism, hatred, racism, ideology. It cannot be eradicated. It was always there. It will always be there. Depending on the technology, it will take different forms. And the only way that we can combat it is to learn from history, and at the same time, okay, only through education. And I can tell you unequivocally, I started to speak in 2008. During that time, although I'm a relatively newcomer in the speaking circle, I've spoken to over 150,000 people, young adults, everything. But unequivocally, I can tell you that in this country, there is no education. There is indoctrination. And I will give you a very specific example to understand what I'm talking about. There are 16 states today that mandate genocide Holocaust curriculum. In all my travels, in all my presentations, I've met only one teacher that teaches World War II, genocide, and Holocaust for a full year. I spoke for 7 years in a row, okay, to the students in his district, 735 seventh graders. And I asked them, okay, since this is in a state that requires genocide Holocaust curriculum, how many students do you have in your class? To my shock, he said 50. I said, wait a minute, how come only 50? He said, it is an elective course. So we have to be very precise on the words that we're using, not to perpetuate false narratives. So the word mandate, in reality, has no meaning whatsoever. And so he is teaching it for a full year, but a few, okay, will teach it for a semester, most of them for a few days, and there is no unified curriculum to teach the story the same way. So what's happening, for instance, right now with the anti-Semitism has always been there. We have to separate between anti-Semitism and hatred. As a Jew, as an Israeli, I do not fight just anti-Semitism. That refers only to one group. I fight hatred. No ethnic group, no human being should be persecuted or intimidated or be afraid, okay, to speak, or to do whatever they want to do. But what I really wanted to stress is when we are talking about anti-Semitism, right now, because of the social media, it took a new form. And they say, you know something, I'm not an anti-Semite. I'm against Israel. Who lives in Israel? They're Jews. Of course you are an anti-Semite when you use that you are okay against the state of Israel and everything else. I will talk later if you want to. I will give you specific examples of how people use the words that perpetuate false narratives. And we have to remember what Joseph Goebbels, the minister of propaganda under Hitler, said, which is very apropos today in our times. And he said, a lie told long enough becomes truth. So again, to answer your specific question, the only thing in my mission in life is to educate the next generation. And all the changes in the world have been accomplished by the young people. So it's up to them to make this a better world, a kinder world for themselves, their children, and their grandchildren.
Thanks, Sammy. Since you brought it up, let's talk about Israel. I noticed it's in your background, it's the pattern on your tie, and you and your family moved to Israel years after being liberated from the camp and then served in the Air Force. So clearly Israel is very, very important to you. We have an interfaith audience tonight, and I think it would be great if you could explain the significance of Israel to you and to Jews and why it's so special and important.
What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make a connection between the Holocaust and the state of Israel. And I want everybody to remember that during the Holocaust, Jews died because we did not have a country. On Yom HaZikaron, this is the National Memorial Day, we remember the people that died for us to have a country. I also emphasize the importance of the state of Israel to the Jews in diaspora. To give a specific example, in 2015, because of the violence in France, 8,500 French Jews made Aliyah, which means they moved to Israel to find a safe haven. A lot of people also believe that the state of Israel came into existence because of anti-Semitism and because of the Holocaust. They were factors, but that is not correct. Israel came into existence because the British colony collapsed. As a matter of fact, Jordan and Syria did not exist, and we got only 22% of the area that was promised to us in the Balfour Declaration in 1917. Israel is the rebirth of our homeland. And a lot of people are saying that they are against Israel, they are against Zionism. To me, to be a Zionist means that the Jews have a right to have their own country and to determine their own future. What I also want to emphasize that because, like for instance, the Italians are coming from Italy, Greeks are coming from Greece, Jews are coming from Judea. So we have to understand that this is our homeland. The word occupation of force cannot be used. You cannot occupy your own land. A lot of people use the word West Bank. West Bank was a name given by the Jordanians, west of the River Jordan. Okay, we have to use, okay, the word Judea and Samaria. And I want to explain the reason why I feel so strongly about it. Subliminally, if you use the word West Bank, automatically you think of occupation. When you use the word Judea and Samaria, okay, subliminally, automatically, you think of homeland, okay? So this is very, very important to make that particular difference. And the other thing is, I want to say is that we have to be very careful by using the proper words and not lump together things that are different. Like for instance, somebody said that the Holocaust is happening today in the world. It's a complete lie. Genocide, yes. Okay, you cannot lump together genocide and Holocaust. They are two different things. People like to lump together anti-Semitism and hatred. They are not the same thing. So we have to be very, very precise in the words that we are using. And because of the social media, young people do not do, most of the time, do the research. They hear something, they will repeat it, and it's repeated so often that eventually becomes a truth. And I can give you many examples in that area, but I'm leaving it to Peter.
Sammy, I wanted to follow up with you on earlier tonight. You mentioned that you don't just fight anti-Semitism, you fight all bigotries. And earlier you were talking to us about how the Uyghur issue in China is very important to you. Are there other current issues today that you care very much about?
I care every group, so I'm making myself available like I made myself tonight. I mentioned that I will make myself available to Marta if they need me, if I can be of help in any shape or form. I also mentioned that there is a prototype talking about the Holocaust to the Muslim kids. I am interested in that one. I'm also interested to be part of the interfaith dialogues, okay? Let me be more precise. I believe in a dialogue, but many people are not always sure what the dialogue really means. And I'll give you an example. When I was at UC Berkeley, I found out that a Christian Lebanese student who had a very large Muslim and Christian following had extreme negative feelings about the state of Israel. And I was wondering if he would be willing to talk to me. And to my surprise, he said yes. As I asked him, why do you feel that way about the state of Israel? I made sure that even facially, I did not give him the opportunity to misinterpret that I am confrontational. The way you treat a person, that's the way they will treat you. So he gave me the same courtesy. And after approximately 45 minutes, we shook hands. And I said, look, you are lumping together two different things. They are not the same. If you are against the Israeli government's policy, you have my blessing. But the state of Israel has done nothing to you. Can you separate the two issues? And because we had a dialogue, it was not confrontation. He said, yes. And that's what I want to try to teach the young people to learn. It's a skill. but to have a dialogue and not confrontation.
You have a personal mantra about being an upstander, not a bystander, which kind of relates to what we were just talking about. So are there specific aspects today where you think that applies, where speaking out is really important? And how do we do that?
I think I'm not the one that invented it, but I don't know where I read about it, that somebody said, I think it was Elie Wiesel, if I'm not mistaken, maybe somebody else. And he said the biggest crime is to be indifferent, to be silent. And as a bystander, you are not helping the victim. You are helping the oppressor. And as a bystander, you are part of the problem. And that's my goal, is to empower the young people to become upstanders. And as an upstander, you become part of the solution. And tonight, I'm going to use you as an example of being a true upstander.
Oh,
Thank you, Peter.
I'm so
And
touched.
Brandon. Okay, but I'm talking mostly because we've been primarily in touch.
Yeah, many times. I wanted to ask you about your homeless stint back in 1996. That played a very pivotal role in your life. And I was actually surprised to read that a fairly large number of Holocaust survivors have found themselves homeless and impoverished. Your situation's a little bit different, but can you tell the story of your homelessness and how that became a catalyst for kind of reinventing yourself?
Interestingly enough, Holocaust survivors are not necessarily homeless. In my particular case, I will tell you, I was homeless. But 1/3 of the Holocaust survivors in the United States lived under the poverty line. And my story was actually featured on CNN. Interestingly enough, I became homeless because I trusted friends. And they put me in a position that I became homeless. And whether we know it or not, but we are always, and almost all of us, are prisoners of our own mind. And how did I become a free man? And then I will go answer your question. But how did I become a free man? There are two things in this country that I am very unhappy. Number one, people have forgotten how to disagree in a civil way. And number two, our leaders do not teach the young people to take responsibility for their actions. If you will pay attention to the news, everybody blames to somebody else. Nobody, okay, is guilty of anything. In my particular case, I had decided to take responsibility for being homeless. And I said, you know something, I made two mistakes. Number one, I gave them cash. Prove it. Number two, I did not put it in writing. So in my own mind, I said, you know something, the people that put me in the position that I became homeless are not guilty. They took advantage of my stupidity. So now what I had to do is I had, number one, I had to forgive myself. Number two, I had to be kind to myself. And all of a sudden, I became a free man. I don't have the need to blame anybody. I don't have the need to blame circumstances. And I am able to move forward. When I was homeless, and I was in a shelter, honestly, I did not want to live. I lost my will to live. I even tried to commit suicide because I'm not a street person. And there was one thing that I said to myself, let me test if I still have the will to live. When I was in the shelter, I was an extremely heavy smoker, almost 3 packs a day. I would have never given it up. I loved it so much. To make a long story short, I said, when I will quit smoking, cold turkey, I will recover. I did not say I will try. I will try is not a commitment. I said I will. December 13th, 1996, you first superstitious Friday the 13th, okay, I had my last cigarette. And that's what I want to teach the young people, okay, not to allow anybody to identify who they are. In my particular case, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to be. And within my means, I choose to be a happy person.
You came to be a motivational speaker and Holocaust educator fairly late in your life. For most of your life, you didn't really connect with other survivors or their families. Can you talk about the moment when that sort of crystallized and how that came to be?
Very good question. I lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I met people, Holocaust survivors, and boy, they could not stop talking. And I said, why? Let it go. And I could not understand their need to keep talking and to educate other people. For 63 years, I felt that I don't belong to either generation. I felt I don't belong to the Holocaust survivors because number one, I have no memory of that period of time. And until the Eichmann trial in 1961 in Israel, which was a trial about the Holocaust, the other trial, the Nuremberg trial, was not about the Holocaust, was to bring the high-ranking Nazi criminals to justice. Until the Eichmann trial, the Holocaust survivors felt guilty, ashamed, and like victims. And they wanted, especially the children, to grow up normal, to have a normal life in a normal childhood. And they did not want to burden the kids with those horror stories. So obviously, I knew nothing for 63 years. And I felt I don't belong to the children of the Holocaust survivors because most of them were born in the DP camps. DP camps displaced people. Those were camps run by the Allies. Conditions were very difficult. They had to be in those camps for 3 to 5 years because they had no place to go. But the threat of death did not exist. And there were two events, which I call in Yiddish, Basher, meant to be, that put me, changed my life and put me in the speaking circuit. The Holocaust survivor, the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. closed its doors to the general public for 16 years. They closed the doors to the general public for 2 days, and they opened up only to the Holocaust survivors, their children, their liberators. I never went. In November 1st and November 2nd of 2003, Bashir meant to be, I decided to go. There were over 8,000 people from all over the world. And at the table where I was sitting, I met a man born in the same city, been in the same camp, the same years, 1941, 1944. He was taken, he was 8 months old. I was taken when I was a year and a half. That's the difference between history and living history. And by meeting him, that prompted me to stop ignoring being a Holocaust survivor and to do something about it. In 2007, I joined the second largest Holocaust museum in the country, the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust here in New York. And in 2008, I got my first assignment to speak to sixth graders. Okay, everyone that is a speaker today has spoken publicly. If you will look back, you will remember that your first presentation is not the best, not the most complete. I did not have a story. I did not know that I can tell a story, and I had no idea what impact I will have on my first presentation on such young people. Again, meant to be, they sent me thank you letters, each one better than the other. But one sixth grader wrote, P.S. Your story was overwhelming. And I promise I will pass my story to your children. I will pass your story to my children. Because of her, when I realized in my first presentation the impact that I had on such young people, I have decided to dedicate the rest of my life to reach as many young people as I can, nationally and internationally.
Thanks for sharing that, Sammy. I wanted to remind the audience we're actually taking Q&A at the end, as Zainab Khan from MALA is going to be moderating Q&A with audience questions. So if people have questions, please submit those. We're going to get to those in the next 20 minutes or so. Okay. Sammy, I wanted to ask you about last year you became kind of an internet sensation when you hosted, I think it was a 16-hour conversation on the new social media app Clubhouse, back when it was popping. And that was just pretty remarkable. Could you talk about that experience and what it was like being on for 16 hours, talking to 1,000 people on basically a brand new social media app?
My friend, okay, Kosha Dilts, he is a famous Jewish rapper, and Adam Sway, okay, they brought me to the Clubhouse. But I have a lot of energy, and I teach young people when they go to university, they choose a profession, not to choose a profession that will make more money. They have to choose a profession that they can be passionate about. And because of my passion and my need to teach and to share, for me, giving 6-7 presentations in one day is nothing. It's common. It's a common thing. For me to speak, to answer questions for 16 hours straight, again, it's normal because I'm so passionate about it that I can keep going and going and going, like the, you know, like the bunny, the batter, yeah. So I keep going. So that's why I'm so passionate about it that, you know, I told you that before when I met the Holocaust survivors in Milwaukee, I was surprised for their need to keep talking. And once I started to talk and seeing the impact that I'm having on young people, it's, I can't stop now.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you one more question before we segue to our Q&A with Zainab. If you could share, what is it that gives you hope and optimism for the future?
Yeah. I know that a lot of the people, because of the situation today that it's happening worldwide, anti-Semitism, hatred, and all of the things, and politically what's happening, a lot of people are very pessimistic about the future. I'm an optimist. I've always been an optimist. And I don't have the feeling that, you know, it's as desperate as a lot of people think it is. The pendulum swings from one extreme to another extreme, and eventually, okay, it comes to the middle. Right now, we are at one particular extreme. By educating the next generation, it will come back slowly. It's not going to be suddenly. It will take time. And I want everybody to think of one person at a time. Not to think globally, but we have to mentor at least one person and make sure that that person will mentor somebody else. I can give you a very specific example. I spoke at Bergen Community College, and as an Israeli, there was a Palestinian there and asked me a question to which there is no answer because it had no context. It was out of the blue. So I tried to show him a different perspective on the conflict of Israel-Palestine. Every time he came back with the same question. So finally I said, you know something, let's agree that we disagree. When I answered and I talked to him, I looked him in the eyes. But I knew that he is not going to change his mind. So I was not talking to him. Although I looked at him and talked to him, I was actually addressing the audience. And the interesting part is, after my presentation, one student came to me and she said, I did not know that. And boy, did I feel good. I said, yes, I succeeded. So think one person at a time. If you reach 10 people, it's a bonus. Reach 20, okay, it's wonderful. But teach always one person at a time, and each one, okay, will mentor somebody else. And in the long run, we will make it a better world. And the reason that I'm so passionate in talking to the next generation, to the young people, I start with fourth graders, is because they are our future. They will make the difference, okay, to make it a kinder, more tolerant, and more prosperous world.
Thank you, Sammy. I think right now I'm going to pass the mic to Zainab Khan from Muslim American Leadership Alliance.
Thank you, Peter, for moderating such an incredible conversation with Sammy. Sammy, I can easily see how you spent 16 hours on Clubhouse, because I can sit here for another 12 hours listening to you. And Masha, you have the energy to keep going for 16 hours, but you've covered such a broad and tremendous scope of the human condition. And we have a few questions that are being asked both on Zoom and on Facebook. One of the questions that somebody has asked is, what happened in your life immediately following the war?
Okay. My mother and I were born outside of Romania proper. Okay, it was okay. It was an area that until 1941, okay, belonged to the former Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
My father, on the other hand, was born in Romania proper. As I mentioned, we were deported by the Romanians. In 1946, the Romanian government allowed a small group of Jews to repatriate. My father was at that time an anti-communist, and he decided to choose the lesser of the two evils and decided to go to Romania. For whatever reason, he settled in a very small town in Transylvania. So right now you have the honor to talk to the Jewish Dracula. But that's where I grew up until I was almost 21, 1961, when the whole family went to Israel. As a matter of fact, my father applied to go to Israel in 1949, but it took 12 years until he finally got the visa. In Israel, I served in the Israeli Air Force, and in 1968, by myself, I came to the States to meet my uncle. From my father's side, from 42 people, only 2 survived. Obviously, my father and my uncle. My uncle was not a survivor. He was a refugee in only 3 countries that officially accepted Jewish refugees: Dominican Republic, China, and Philippines. My uncle was a refugee in Shanghai.
Oh, I was unaware of
And
that.
that's why I'm saying not to make comparisons to the past, because today a lot of people, many countries are accepting refugees from different countries. In those days, there were only 3 countries that officially accepted Jewish refugees. Individuals save Jews. Not
Wow.
even the United States filled the quota, okay,
Mhm.
knowing, okay, the disaster that happened.
Somebody named Hannah Simpson wants to let you know that she's here watching and sends her regards. So I wanted to let you know that. Then we have another question. You talk about civil discourse earlier. Can you give us some advice on how to facilitate that and remain calm and continue the conversation during difficult moments? I think that's an excellent question, given that there's so much polarization and you have given us such powerful examples already of when you had come into dialogue and discussion. So again, to reiterate the question, give us some advice on how to facilitate the civil discourse and how do you continue to remain calm and continue the conversation during difficult moments?
Number one, I want to say, nobody can change anybody. And take it literally.
Mhm.
All I can do personally, and everybody else, we can give a different perspective, show a different perspective. That person has to make the change. That is number one. And we have a tendency to defend ourselves because we think that by attacking Israel, I am attacked. And we are getting in a defensive mode, okay? Let's say that somebody would come to me and say, you know something? The state of Israel is an apartheid state. And I lived during that period of time, okay? So I heard a lot about it. My first reaction will be, you know something? I agree with you. You will look at me. You, Israeli, agree with me? And I say, yes, but you brought it up. So obviously you know a lot about it. Can you tell me what apartheid is? Where did you learn about it? Okay, how did you find out? Who told you about it? Okay, which channel did you see it, whatever? And I don't have to tell him that he is ignorant. He will find out by himself. Okay, I don't have to antagonize him. Okay, so by asking a lot of questions, instead of discussing, once I know where that person is coming from, then I can give my answer that is relevant and I can remain calm. Okay, it's, you know something? People are automatically expecting action, reaction.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's automatic. Okay, but all of a sudden when I'm coming, an Israeli, okay, Holocaust survivor, I agree with you that Israel is the apartheid state. You're shocked. Okay, and I can ask a question. So you have to find based on your own personality. But my suggestion is to remain calm, ask a lot of questions. Okay, don't go right away on the defensive mode or the attack mode or whatever it is. Okay, by asking questions, you can remain calm. And okay, and you don't go in that mode of I'm going to teach you, I'm going to do. Don't let him find out how this. And I, out of curiosity, I wanted to know what is apartheid state? What is the definition of apartheid state? You know something? I Googled it, came out the whole page. There is no way in your wildest imagination that Israel is an apartheid state based on that definition. No way, unless you want to believe it and unless you're ignorant. But okay, but that's my suggestion. Okay, be calm, ask questions, okay, that allows you also to take a deep breath.
And Sami, my question also is, and I guess this is coming a lot from our community as well. How can the Muslim and Jewish communities work together to combat hate and combat anti-Semitism? I know you have a clear distinction of the two. And so what do we do with these two communities, our respective broad communities? What can we do to combat this?
Wonderful. How did we become friends? By having a dialogue, but getting together, by talking to each other. Okay, remember one thing: we hate people because we don't know them. Mm-hmm. We don't know them because we hate them. When I was in Romania, my name is spelled with two N's. Steigmann, the German spelling. The Jewish spelling is with one N. And I don't have what quote unquote people imagine themselves that the Jew is supposed to look like. So people, okay, they saw my name with two N's and they automatically started to talk to me about Jews and anti-Semitic things and everything else. And I looked at that person. I said, do you know who you're talking to? I'm Jewish. Oh, I did not mean you. I mean them. Why them and why not me? It's because they knew me. I'll give you an example right now what social media is doing. In China, okay, there are very, very few Jews. Very few. The interesting part of it is Chinese, I would say 99.5%, 99.5 have never seen a Jewish person. And the Jews keep a very low profile. Because of the social media, believe it or not, 53% of Chinese people have anti-Semitic feelings, hate Jews. And it's, you put it on the social media, one person repeats it, another person repeats it, they don't do the research. And like I told you before, okay, it becomes the truth. A lie told long enough becomes the truth. How to combat it is, that's what I'm trying to do, is to be in a interfaith panel, to talk to people, okay? You don't have to agree with me. I don't have to agree with you, okay? We have different perspectives, but just listen to what the other person says and you create a friendship. And that eventually can lead to a relationship, can lead to other good things and everything else. How do you think that I got involved with the Uyghur people, with MALA? Out of the blue, I never heard, okay, of the Uyghur. Did not know about it. Okay, I was invited at the rally, okay, to speak in front of the UN. So I did some research and I found out that in the former Soviet Union, okay, if the Jews did not want to be deported to Siberia or face other dire consequences, they went to the south, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan. In Uzbekistan, okay, there are Uyghur people. Their language is close to the Turkish one, but they're Muslims. Okay, guess what? They received the Jews, okay, with open arms. I never knew that until I was asked, okay, to speak on their behalf. And like I said, I don't fight just anti-Semitism, I fight hatred. It's the same thing. I never heard of MALA. I never heard, okay, of Azerbaijan, what happened in Azerbaijan and everything else with your people. So many times, okay, we have to be willing to be open, okay, to learn about new information and to reach out to the people. And look, people, in my opinion, all of them are good people. Okay, but there are exceptions, so naturally, but in general, they are very good people. I think the biggest problems are not the people. The biggest problems are the leadership that incites the people, okay, against other groups of people. So it will be up to the young people, okay, to be educated and to bring in a new leadership that can bridge the gap together and bring people together and have a better world.
Amen to that. And Sammy, again, we value on behalf of MALA, we truly value your friendship, your guidance, your expertise, your story, and we look forward to working with you in the future, sharing your story, continuing educating people in our communities. That's our goal. And I know that there have been, registrations on Zoom and where people are watching on Facebook, and it's going to be put on YouTube. And I encourage everybody to really take heed of your message. And I really want to thank you once again for allowing MALA, as a representative from a Muslim American organization, to be able to share your story in commemoration of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. I want to thank AJC, Judy Greenspan from WNET, and now we have Dr. Ari Gordon from AJC to lead a prayer for us to close the remarks for this evening.
I have a question, if I may.
Yes.
And I'm addressing it to Peter and he can bring it. Okay, if it's possible, if there are questions, I am willing to stay and answer all of the questions, but that will not be part of the official program, which will end. And after that, if you want to leave the mic open, I'm willing to stay. Okay, but okay, that's up to you if you can.
Thank you for that wonderful offer, Sammy. I think what we will do is we will wrap this up and we will have another segment of this conversation to be continued, because I don't think that this is something that we will be doing once. We have partnered with AJC many times. We've been wonderful partners for years across their chapters, the New York chapter, Los Angeles chapter, the Chicago chapter. So we have been wonderfully partnered with them. We're a national organization. And again, thank you, Brandon and Dr. Ari. I'd love to hand the mic over to you for the prayer and for concluding the event.
Thank you, Zainab. Thank you, Sammy. Thank you to AJC and MALA for your wonderful partnership here in New York. And as you said, Zainab, across the country. The idea of Muslims and Jews coming together to learn about the Holocaust and its lessons in advance of Holocaust Remembrance Day is a unique opportunity that we have. As we sit in the wake of the hostage situation in the Colleyville synagogue, we're confronted with the choice of how to respond. The rabbi made a choice to rescue his congregation. The interfaith community made a choice to stand up together. And each of us is confronted with a choice. How do I respond when I learn about this act of hatred and violence? Do I wring my hands? Do I bury my head in the sand? Or do I use this as an opportunity to advance my own political or communal or personal interests? Or do I show leadership? And in thinking about this over the weekend, I was reminded of a brilliant quote from the book of Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and the founder of logotherapy, in his book, Man's Search for Ultimate Meaning. He said, the last of human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. There were always choices to make every day, every hour, offered the opportunity to make a decision which determined whether you would or would not submit to those powers which threatened to rob you of your very self, your inner freedom, which determined whether or not you became the plaything to circumstance, renouncing your freedom and your dignity, or if you would make another choice. I'm a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, and I remember the stories that I was told that my grandfather passed down in Chernova in Czechoslovakia, where he worked for the administrative government there, and one day received word of a list of Jewish people that were going to be deported to the camps. He had gone to high school with someone who had become a Catholic priest, lived in the area, and together they forged baptism certificates to protect Jews from deportation, and those that they could not save, they warned to send off. And it wasn't just Christians that made choices like those. We know the story of Abdul Qadir ben Garbit, the rector of the Great Mosque of Paris, who issued hundreds of certificates to Jews in Paris at the time as Muslims to save their lives. He hid Jews in his mosque. These stories are far too few, but they are stories that we need to tell if we want to take inspiration to do what our friend Sammy told us, to be upstanders against hate. Now, America is different. It's not a Holocaust, it's not a genocide, but we at AJC, we do ask, what do people need to do in order to stand up? And one thing we think is that leadership needs to write a new narrative. We did this when the American Jewish Committee and the Muslim World League and its head, Dr. Muhammad al-Isa, led a group of 60 Muslim leaders from 28 countries to Auschwitz to learn about the Holocaust, to push back against Holocaust denial, and to say, no matter who are the perpetrators or who are the victims, we stand up for humanity. We know that education is important. And so our AJC Arabic series is teaching about Jewish issues in Arabic to the Arab world. Our video on the Holocaust has been viewed 11 million times. Sammy, you said this, when we educate, we empower people to stand up. Here in the United States, we partner with groups like MALA to show that Muslims and Jews can be partners against hate and to heal the divides that so often lead to religious minorities being in the crosshairs. Our Muslim Jewish Advisory Council advocates against hate crimes, and recently we partnered with another Muslim group, Muflihun, to launch the Tackle Upstander training to build our prevention frameworks in local communities. We are not the only group doing this. MALA is doing a lot. Many groups out there are doing a lot. We ask you all to be involved. The PBS Exploring Hate program is a wonderful way to learn and educate yourself so that you can become an ally as well. And we're grateful to you for co-hosting this program. I'll close with a prayer and a thought from a figure sacred to both of our traditions, Avraham or Ibrahim. Now, we have to remember that Abraham was one thing, if nothing else, countercultural. He lived in a culture of paganism and idolatry, and he heard a different call than what everything around him was happening. And the world has ethical monotheism because he did not just follow what everyone was doing. He smashed the idols and he led to a new path. My prayer for us is that we take strength from our forefather, Abraham. We smash the idols of complacency and we stand up together against anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and all forms of hatred. On this Holocaust Remembrance Day, we hope that you will all take this lesson and stand with us. Thank you.
Rabbi, before you give your prayer, I want to give you the last word. But I want to tell something that Peter has asked me, and I did not give an adequate answer. And that was about the hostage that happened in Texas. And one of the things that take a look at our agencies and our media and everything that is happening. FBI, before they did, okay, the, what do you call it, the investigation and to find out the truth, what happened. FBI said that it was not against, okay, Jewish people, it was not anti-Semitic. How can it be that somebody goes to a synagogue, takes the rabbi and everything else, and it's not anti-Semitic, it's not against the Jews? And this is what's happening is before the investigation was finished, they came out with a false statement. And people believe it, and they will hear what was said by the FBI, not their retraction. And that is the problem.
And I think that, speaking from on behalf of the Muslim American community, as I had said in my opening remarks, that Muslims definitely have to now, it's been a while, it's been a long time coming. We have to take accountability for our words, for the anti-Semitism that exists within our community. And this is why it's such an honor to partner with you and to share your story, and for us to be unwavering for our support for our Jewish brothers and sisters. This is, you know, for me, I will say I am very pro-Israel, and the culture I think is beautiful. I think the history is beautiful. I think the people are beautiful. I think that it's just such a deep shame that we have elected officials that are Muslim heritage that, you know, have anti-Semitic tropes, and we have organizations that are Muslim that are very, very anti-Semitic. But we at MALA really want to reiterate that we are different, that we are not like the existing groups. And again, you know, bless you, God bless us. Dr. Ari, you've said some beautiful, beautiful closing words. And the prayer from Ibrahim, you know, it's from us all, from our heart. And again, thank you, Sammy. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Dr. Ari. And thank you, Judy and Brandon. And of course, Sammy, we look forward to another conversation with you. This is just one of many to come.
And I'm very honored to be with all of you here and to have the opportunity to build a new friendship, new relationship. Okay, thank you. God bless America. Am Israel Chai. Okay, God bless all of you.